Good morning. Welcome to our virtual program. Today's program is Africulture, the story, plight, and progress of a Black Century farm in Piedmont, Virginia. And we're very excited to have Michael Carter Jr. with us today to give that talk. My name is Carlene Kowalczyk. I am the Executive Director of the Louisa County Historical Society. First, I just want to go over how this platform works. If you look on your right-hand side of your screen, you should see a chat box. Feel free to introduce yourself, ask any questions or comments throughout the presentation today. At the end of today's presentation, you will see my contact information. And so if you have any follow-up questions after the presentation, feel also free to reach out to me as well. Today's presentation is co-sponsored. Okay, hold on. Sorry, 1 second. I see a comment that there is saying there's an issue with Demio streaming server. Can everyone hear me? Am I broadcasting live okay? Please use the chat room to say if it's functioning properly. Yes, perfect. Okay. So thank you for letting me know about that streaming error message, but hopefully things will continue all right. Please use the chat room if at any point something goes wrong on the public end. So we are co-hosting this program today with the Orange County Historical Society. And so I would like to introduce Ray Ezell, who is the president of that organization, to say a few words from that organization. Ray?
All right, thanks, Carlene. Just wanted to give everybody just a very brief introduction into the Orange County Historical Society. We were established back in 1965, and obviously we're dedicated to the preservation and distribution of the history of Orange County and the folks who live there. We have a research center, which is located on Caroline Street in the town of Orange, and most weekdays we're open from 1 to 5. There at that location, and we also have a wide array of books and DVDs on various topics of Orange County history that are for sale there. But also we produce a semi-annual research newsletter, which presents scholarly research on topics of Orange history, and also something that's relatively new that we just started during the past year is an electronic bulletin that comes out occasionally called the Orange Oracle. And over the past several months, we've also established a YouTube channel, which is called History to Go. And there is where we house and provide video presentations on various aspects of Orange history as well. So I encourage everybody to take a look at that. When and if you can, and hopefully you'll be pleased with what you see. So we're real happy and real excited to co-sponsor this program with the Louisa Group, and I'll turn it back over to Carlene. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Okay, so first, before I give a little spiel about the Louisa County Historical Society, I just want to thank the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation. And they have partially funded this program through a grant that we have received, and our other supporters as well, which have allowed the Historical Society to continue to expand and grow over every year. So the Historical Society, we have a museum, and we also have a research library and publications as well. But we have two main initiatives that we're currently working on. The first initiative is to build stronger relationships between the Historical Society and the Black community to achieve a more sustainable, accessible, and equitable preservation of our local history. We're currently working on a program. It's a pilot program funded by Charlottesville Area Community Foundation, and we are working with a Community Advisory Council who has selected 3 projects for us to implement this year. The first is a remembrance project on the partial integration of the Louisa County High School in 1965 under the Freedom of Choice Plan. The second project is gathering oral histories from the community. And the third project is working with a student intern who is helping us plan how we can get local Black history into our local school curriculum. Our second main initiative that we're working on at the moment is digitizing our archives and making them available online. And that is going to be a long project, but we're just at the start of it. So I am at this time going to introduce our speaker, who we are very excited to have with us today. Michael Carter Jr. is an 11th generation farmer and is a 5th generation to farm on Carter Farms, his family's century farm in Orange County, Virginia, where he gives workshops on how to grow and market ethnic vegetables, farm business management, food safety, and a host of other agricultural and African American history workshops, seminars, and trainings. With Virginia State University, he is the Small Farm Resource Center Coordinator for the Small Farm Outreach Program. Michael sits on the boards of the Virginia Association of Biological Farmers and Virginia Foodshed Capital. He also served as the state coordinator for the Black Church Food Security Network and as the food safety coordinator for the 6th state Farm to Table organization. He acquired an agricultural economics degree from North Carolina A&T State University and has worked in Ghana, Kenya, and Israel as an agronomist and organic agricultural consultant. Carter Farms has birthed Hen Asem, Our Story, and Agriculture that teach and expound on the contributions of Africans and African Americans to agriculture worldwide and the many stories that history almost forgot. So we are very excited to welcome Michael here today. Thank you, Michael.
Historical Society and Orange County Historical Society. Thank you. I'm originally from Caroline County, so forgive my Caroline County twang. I don't necessarily have a Louisa or Orange County twang as much. But I am Michael Carter Jr. With Africulture and Carter Brothers and Carter Farms. And I'm going to share a little bit of my story, my family history with you all. This history is going to go through a lot of other histories that may not be comfortable with some, but I feel like it's definitely relevant to our times. And it shares my story, a bit of my foundation. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn something. And I hope you, just appreciate what we're sharing today. So let me start here. Welcome, Akwaba. Akwaba is Ghanaian Tree language for welcome. Louisa Historical Society and Orange County Historical Society. And we're going to start my history in 1860. You know, my family first arrived here in Virginia at the latest of 1745. Some of my family actually arrived at the first plantation in America, which is in James City at the Shirley Plantation. And you hear mentions of the Shirley Plantation and other things, Shirley name. So I'm not quite sure how long we've been here. We could have been here as early as 1622, but we also could be here as late as 1745. But we've been here before Virginia was Virginia. And the United States was the United States as we know it today. And this particular picture is of my great-grandmother's grandmother, Miss Courtney Ellis Coleman. And this is a slave register for Orange County. And I'm not sure, I believe my family is on this register, maybe not on this particular one. I think it's on the next page that Miss Courtney Ellis is in. And she is a female. As you can see, you should see Robert Ellis to the right bottom screen of that would have been the owner of these individuals. You see the Estes family as well, which is where my family farms land is buttressed against. We start this story in 1860 to kind of give an overview of where we were as the formulation of agriculture as we know it started in the United States of America. So in 1860, Miss Courtney Ellis, my great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, was an enslaved African on the Ellis plantation. And around the same time, 1862, the USDA was formed. And the USDA was formed in a way, or for the reason of Abraham Lincoln foreseeing that the agricultural base of free labor was going to be no longer, either through war or through war. He hoped that, I guess, through the war, the abolishment of slavery or the system of slavery would have changed somewhat after the war. Didn't know how he put these in place to support agriculture. And through this particular foundation of the United States Department of Agriculture, we had two different separate but unequal systems of agriculture. And the various components of this dual system were two different avenues for farm support, which later became farm extension agents, two avenues for getting loans, equipment, seeds, and going to market. And we'll talk about this particular era because many Black farmers at the time in the late 1800s were sharecroppers, which means they got their loan support equipment from plantation owners who owned the property before them. There was also federal activity and support predominantly targeted toward white farmers and white institutions. They gave a foundational base for a lot of these farmers. We call the Morrill Acts and the establishment of land grant universities. Land grant universities started around the 1860s for what we call PWIs, predominantly white institutions like Virginia Tech, University of Alabama, other predominantly white land grant institutions. The 1890s saw the beginning or formation of the African or the Black land grant universities. In Virginia, it was Virginia State University. North Carolina A&T State University. Going on down the line to Tuskegee was the only private college. Florida A&M, Alabama A&M, and several others throughout. So we had a 30-year, there was a 30-year start between the white universities and the Black universities. Because the universities already set up for a lot of these white institutions, we saw that head start. And many refer to this particular era as the Jim Crow era. And I use this particular picture that to help us understand what the Jim Crow era was and is. And Jim Crow was not just a name of a random person or random song. It really was a person who focused on being in that blackface. The song Jim Crow was the first song that publicly was performed in blackface in the 1830s. And it's through this song that a whole era was named from 1865 to 1965, the blackface era. So I want us to think about when we use the term Jim Crow, we're really referring to the blackface era. And we can see, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of various artifacts and other things with features like this. This is from early 1900s, Fairbanks gold dust. And this is an old Lever Brothers product. And you can see that face as well. So this became not just an era of Black people, but how Black people were seen, how Black people were treated and mocked in modern day society. We had plenty of minstrel shows, and I'm a collector of a lot of these things, so that's why I have quite a few of them. And it was quite commonplace. And this was the environment that bore a lot of pride amongst African Americans, despite what would have seemed to be a negative take. It really forced us to be dependent upon ourselves and to take pride in our history and be focused on what we desired to do. In the same time period, we had a tremendous rise in Black land ownership. And in our nation around 1910 rather, our nation had more than 893,000 Black farmers. Within Virginia, we had close to about 30, 35 Black farmers at this time period, according to the National Ag Census. Black farm owners and Black farm workers represented a combined total of 60% of our farm's labor force and ownership. There was also a tremendous rise in state-sanctioned violence. And before we go to the state-sanctioned violence, I do what we call an Afromercial. Afromercial just highlights great African Americans from right now Orange County, Virginia. So right here we have Madam Nannie Helen Barrows. Miss Nannie Helen Barrows was born here in Orange County. Her father, John Barrows, is buried at my family church in Shady Grove in I guess it's outside of Thornhill, in Thornhill side of Orange County. My grandmother's side of the family was raised at. And she's been a friend of the family for a long time. She's actually believed to be one of my distant cousins. And Miss Nanny Helen Barrows was a great educator, orator, teacher, civil rights advocate, and really an equal rights advocate. She was one of the first individuals to really push for not just Black rights, but women's rights as well. And she started the National Training School in Washington, D.C. in 1909. Ms. Barrows from there, gained national fame, but stayed committed to her teaching and dedication and really pushed amongst her students, which are mostly uneducated adult women, the Bible, the bath, and the broom, saying that they need to have a clean home, clean body, and a clean mind or soul. Ms. Barrows transitioned in 1961, but her impact upon Washington, D.C. is still felt with the Nanny Helen Barrows School, which the National Training School became after she died. And her impact, they named a street after her. So there's a Nanny Helen Barrows Avenue in the Deanwood section of Northeast Washington, D.C. That's the sign off of 295 right there for Barrows Avenue. I used to live on Minnesota Avenue, so I would be on Barrows Avenue all the time and didn't have an understanding that she was actually from Orange County, Virginia. There were a lot of great African Americans who came out of Orange, Louisa, Culpeper, Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, Caroline, but this is one that's closest to home to me. So here's a little information just about Nanny Helen Barrows. I'm sorry, my audio keeps cutting in and out. My apologies, my rural internet is not that good. Sorry about that. Here, this is the first map of what is now known as Carter Farm, the first deed. This is a deed before our family purchased the land. Back in 1884, it was when this deed was created. You can see, not sure if you can see, but the bottom right of that map says Red Oak on Estes land. Mr. Estes was one of those slave owners on that slave register. So we ended up purchasing this land. But we didn't purchase it without any strife or struggle. During the same time, there was a high period of lynchings or state-sanctioned violence that was going on during this time period. You can see the increase in violence really around 1910 and 1920 is where it really was at an all-time high. Between the periods of 1865 and 1965, there were over 5,000 lynchings. And a lynching at that time, and it still is, was a public murder with usually no repercussions, no casualties, no one charged for anything. And this was literally one lynching a week in America for 75 to 100 years. One lynching a week, one public murder a week. And my family wasn't, well, I won't say no one. There was individuals in our family who were lynched for various things in Orange County. And I won't go into too much of that history as I don't know all the details about what happened, but I know that I've had great uncles who are no longer with us because of this action. And this is the kind of terror that a lot of Black farmers and Black landowners had and possessed. And despite this terror, we still moved on. During this period as well, there were a whole lot of Black massacres. Massacres being that more than 10 individuals died in one area. In many of these areas, it was a lot more than that, where whole communities were uprooted, where sometimes hundreds of individuals were slain, like in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in Wilmington, North Carolina. These massacres had an impact upon the society at the time. It really was designed to keep the African American in this time in their place. And their place was more to be on a plantation or as a sharecropper than it was to be a landowner or community developer. But despite this, you had individuals, communities like Freetown in Orange County that continued to thrive and progress. And here, My family was part of that process of thriving and progressing. The document to the left is my family's first purchase of land. My great-great-grandparents, Jeff Shirley and Catherine Shirley, purchased their property in November 5th, 1910, off of Tatum Road. My great-grandfather, the gentleman pictured to the right, I've never met him, don't know anybody who has. Well, I mean, I don't know much about the man, but I know he did purchase another plot of land for our family in 1915. So we actually have 2 Century Farm plots in our family. They both are under the same umbrella of Carter Farms, and they're both all off of Tatum Road, with my grandfather's plot off of Shirley Road, named after my family, the Shirley family. Jefferson Shirley was a progenitor of that, along with his father, which I don't know much about, but they purchased their property, and it's still most of the land is still in our family today. Some of it has been sold off in the past, but we still hold some land property at both Shirley Road and then on Tatum Road as well. In 1925, we saw a tremendous boom of Black farmers and landowners. In Virginia, we had over 100, Virginia had 183,000 farm operators. And of that, almost over 50,000 were Black or non-white farmers. To that picture to the right, the gentleman sitting on the car is my great-grandfather, Guilford White. He had property on Thornhill Road off of Monrovia Road in Orange County, and with one of the deacons of Shady Grove Church, my family church, which my uncle is now the pastor of that church. This is another distant cousin on the tractor there, and we were, again, great stewards of the land, generally custom farmers in the area, doing various work for various individuals, but we were also victims of the times at the time. As we progressed, there was tremendous African migration from 1915 on to 1970. This migration was for a number of reasons. One of the main reasons was state violence against Black people in terms of lynchings, injustice and injustice toward them. Much of my family did migrate, very similar to Miss Burrows, who we talked about, migrated out of Orange County for greater opportunities. The rural areas didn't provide a lot of opportunities for education development for Black people, male or female. Generally, most of these areas provided good sustenance for people who had stores and farms. But if we want to do something a little more professional than that, banker, higher education, teaching, government work, most people went on to Washington, D.C., to Philadelphia, to some of these other places that we see on the map here. This led to what they called the Great Migration. A lot of African Americans left the rural areas to go to better areas of better employment in the North or the West. My family was no different. A lot of my family left Orange County and ended up in Washington, D.C., New Jersey, Delaware, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chicago, New York, etc., where the opportunities would seem to be greater from an employment. As I stated earlier, the pinnacle of Black farmers was around 1925 in Virginia. We had over 50,000 farmers. We had the roaring 20s. Things were going great. But then the Great Depression hit. And the Great Depression caused a tremendous amount of land loss, not just for Black farmers, but for all farmers. And our family was no exception. In the late 1920s, members of my family had a wedding, and they had some things they couldn't pay for, so they just put the land up to try to pay for some of the things that they paid for a wedding. And they were not able to pay for it, and therefore the land became in dispute. I don't know exactly all the details to that particular story, but I know that our land was potentially up for sale. Miss DeJeanette, the state treasurer or the state clerk in Orange County, had a relationship with my great grandmother, and he made her an offer he couldn't refuse. Instead of putting it up for sale, he informed her that it was going to be for sale, and that what needed to be paid. And my grandmother came to the rescue for the family. She wasn't living there at the time. She was living with my great grandfather off of Shirley Road. but she came and made sure that was reality, and I'll go to that in a second. Also in the 1930s, the New Deal came out, and we all can recall the New Deal under Roosevelt. And these were social programs to uplift all Americans, but it really only uplifted certain Americans. It really did not focus on the plight of African Americans. So, and during that time period, we had the Federal Home Loan Bank Act of 1932, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, the Bankhead-Jones Farm Tenant Act of 1937, the Agriculture Adjustment Act of 1938. All these particular acts were focused on farmers, well, not all of them, but on home ownership and farmers. The commodity programs we see in modern farming, the formation of the FSA, or the Farm Service Administration under USDA, the formation of Farm Credit in 1917, and the supplement of that with the Bankhead-Jones Farm Tenant Act in 1937, really buttressed farmers to the point that farming was able to be much more successful and financially viable for a lot of farmers. Where farmers now at this point didn't necessarily have to grow crops to earn income from their land. During the time of Secretary Wallace, there was not a need to grow. There was an embargo kind of to stop growing. The influx of food coming in and trying to balance those prices. The Social Security Act of 1938 actually discriminated against farm workers, and still does to this day, where you cannot qualify for Social Security if you were a farm worker or a domestic worker. And during the time of 1938, you can imagine who mainly the farm workers and domestic workers were. So this also led to that great migration, because your security was not secured if you were a farm worker or domestic worker as an adult. So nothing was paid into Social Security if you were a farm worker or domestic worker. We also had the implementation of the GI Bill, which we'll get into as well. And this is my great grandmother here to the left, Maddie Carter Pryor. In 1942, we can all recall, I'm sure most of us are around that time, during that time, we had D-Day, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And again, during this time period, my family land was kind of in contrite hands. And the option came for them to buy or resecure the family land. And it was put to my great grandmother that needed to come up with $1,250 to keep the family land in the family. And I'm really grateful for the DeJarnettes for making sure that my grandmother had the opportunity, my great grandmother had the opportunity to really, really resecure that land. That could have definitely went another way, and I probably wouldn't be giving this presentation had it gone another way. So during this time period, my grandmother, in her infinite wisdom and quick wit, were going to send off her 3 older sons. My grandfather Warren, which is right next to her, the picture next to her, Warren Carter, Sr., my uncle Alfonso, and my uncle Joe, were all going off to war. But she employed to them that they should send back their checks to secure the land. So they sent back their $29 a month GI checks back to my grandmother so that she could save that up to repurchase or resecure the land, so the family land stayed in the family. In addition to them doing this, my great aunts, this is my Aunt Virginia, my Aunt Marjorie, my Aunt Faye, amongst others, worked domestically in and around Orange as domestic workers, house cleaners, to provide money for that as well. So they did what they needed to do to secure the land. And in 1947, as they returned back from the land, we actually resecured the land. And the land has been in our family since. And it's been in our family really since 1910, but we didn't lose it or had any more risk to our land since then. So we are now owners of the 150-acre, a lot of land still that my great-great-grandfather acquired back in 1910, in addition to the 25 acres that my great-grandfather acquired in 1915. And another Afromercial. Many of you may know her as well, Miss Edna Lewis, out of Freetown area of Orange County. Miss Edna Lewis is another distant cousin of mine, or not even distant cousin, but it is a cousin of mine, and was a contemporary with my great aunts back then. And Miss Edna Lewis was a world-renowned cook, chef, author, restaurateur, cookbook author, who really focused on soul food, healthy living, especially with greens, and being able to tell and craft a story around that food about the cultural experience she had in Orange County and how it related to her cuisine. She was also a great seamstress as well. A dynamic woman and one of the first Black women that was on a postage stamp. So she's another daughter of Orange County whose work and efforts were, valued around the world, just like Nanny Helen Barrows. And as we move down history, part of the GI Bill for my grandfather and his brothers was to get vocational or agricultural training. Unfortunately, because of discrimination at the time, home ownership was not as much of an option. You couldn't get a loan from any bank at the time. And going to school was not an option per se, unless you went to a Black school, but that would keep you away from your family. So you couldn't go to a local school in the area, Germanna or UVA, which would have been a lot closer to Virginia State or Virginia Union. So my grandfather ended up going to George Washington Carver Regional High School. And this school was a segregated school started in 1948 that housed or supported 4 different counties: Culpeper, Madison, Orange, and Rappahannock. Much of my family went to that school. If you see the picture to the bottom left, it's my grandmother to the right, Lucille Carter. My great aunt to the far left, my aunt Annie, Annie Carter. And one of the other alumnus there as well, my aunt Evelyn Carter as well. Carver Center proved to be a great place for Black folks to learn agriculture. In Carver Center, they had a great chapter of the New Farmers Association, which was the Black version or the segregated version of the Future Farmers of America. And this is well, my great grandfather earned a certificate. I'm not sure if you can make those out there, but that's my great grandfather's certificate for his GI Bill training, what they call Public Law 346, which he and my great uncle acquired. And my grandmother rather, was in the second class of George Washington Carver Regional High School graduating class. Her sister was in the first class, and we had subsequent family members in every class up until its closing in 1968. So this is another area that Africulture and Carter Farms works in, helping to revive the Carver Center with Culpeper County. We have a ethnic vegetable plot that we do, in which we grow our ethnic vegetables there at Carver Center. We have another plot this year. We work in conjunction with a group called the Minority and Veteran Farmers of the Piedmont. And we have been working very closely with Virginia Cooperative Extension and the Culpeper County to really teach and share great history that went on at this great high school, as well as share a lot of that history of its graduates and its contributions to society, and more importantly, to the community. And this is some of my family here: my Uncle Warren, my father, a lot of our family here. And in April 1968, tragedy struck the world, and it really struck home with our family as well. April 1968, we can call on April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King was shot and killed in Tennessee. But unfortunately, April 2nd, 1968, the elder brother of our family was also killed on a tractor accident. Mr. Alfonso Carter died April 2nd, 1968, on his Pharma McCormick tractor. It flipped over in the field. I believe it broke his neck, and it was a devastating time for our family, and led to more migration and flight away from the farm. It was something that wasn't talked about much amongst the family. I really didn't know much about it until about 3 to 4 years ago. It's very attractive to see my son on. It's attractive that he was killed upon. And at the time, he had 3 children and a wife that was now left widowed and orphaned. And our family came together to really support the family. Their plot of land was, their family land or family house was put on the land. And the family came around and supported them in their school and schooling fees to ensure that very little was missed. I mean, it's hard to replace the presence of a father, but they did everything possible to make sure that the children did not miss out on anything, including higher education, and what several of them went on to college as well as to other higher degree in the Army to support them and their family. This is one of those moments of tragedy and triumph at the same time. Unfortunately, with the tragedy, many of the family left the land as they graduated high school. The tragedy and trauma of the experience was a lot to take on, which really only left my particular side of the family and my uncle Warren Carter, who was a teacher at Orange County High School for 30 years or so, as really the main stakeholder and caretaker of the land. He's still the caretaker to this day. I'm trying to take that over from him, but it's coming along slowly but surely. And as Carter Farms grew, we had the next generations to come. To the left is my father, Michael Carter Sr., who was a teacher at Caroline County High School for 35 years in agriculture, and is now helping me with the farm. And on that old Ford right there is my youngest son, Shmael, who's also helping me on the farm. I've dedicated myself to really coming back to the farm and telling this story, sharing the experiences, good, bad, and ugly, about our experiences here in America, and our experiences here in Orange County and on our farm. And everything is about perspective. In interviewing my grandmother, and I had my children interview her, they asked her about when she ever experienced racism. And she said, matter of fact, she never experienced racism like that. And that was a very astounding statement of revelation to me, but I can understand her perspective, because if all you knew was levels of discrimination, that was just how things were. And for many Black Americans, that's how things are. Well, whatever happens is what we just have to accept. And, this is how things were. And it was this type of attitude that helped us sustain and be resilient in this community and all communities around the country, where these things were not a big, issue to us. We just kind of dealt with it, shrugged our shoulders, and moving. The discrimination that, my grandfather felt in coming back from World War II and not being able to find a job, not being able to really support your family, was met in stride, but most importantly was support. Where the family kind of huddled together and made sure that we did what we needed to do to support our family. And it's the same thing we try to do now, maybe not with the same amount of racism or discrimination that they experience, but always looking to support one another and to really be a buttress for each other when all is said and done. So this is us at the Carver Center. We're making beds for our demonstration farm. This is my sons on my grandfather's corn planter. And kind of, we're now taking our history and incorporating it as our product or our produce. So we sell our history. We produce our history. My sons have a seed company called CarterBrothers.net. They provide seed. We right now provide seeds for several seed companies, including Southern Exposure Seed Exchange in Louisa County, working with Ira Wallace and her team to provide African seeds or African vegetable seeds to her company. And this is another way that I found to be able to try to keep my family agriculture and more importantly on the land. A lot of time with young people, children especially, they don't really see the value of agriculture and the value of land. And I speak as a son of an agriculture teacher. I didn't see the value of agriculture and the value of the land. And I was in it every single day. And I was counting the days till I didn't have to be in it anymore. And one of the reasons you count those days is because you don't see the economic viability of agriculture. So starting a business for them is to help them see the economic viability of agriculture and to keep them on the land. As most of you all know, land has tremendous value. My great-great-grandparents purchased our land for $722.05 back in 1910. And I dare say now it's probably valued at probably over $1 million. There are very few investments that you can make anywhere where you can have that type of return on your investment. A $722 investment turns to $1 million in 100 years. Even with your best performing stock, I doubt that's going to happen. But land has that value, and that's one of the things we teach at Carter Farms and with agriculture, Africulture. This is just more of our family working together. My father planting or putting down some plastic mulch. My uncle and my two uncles on the various tractors, tilling the field and laying in the mulch. And these are some things to think about as we go into 2021. Black farmers in the area and the state and the nation are at a critical point, what I call an extinction level event. As I mentioned earlier, in 1925, we had over 50,000 Black farmers in the state. Presently, we have less than 1,300. And even at 1,330 that they say that we have, most of those are more landowners than they are farmers. I would dare say we have more like 800 Black farmers in the state, down from 50,000 100 years ago. And you can see the disparities in farming. Black farmers made up 0.011% of those sales of the $3.96 billion of agricultural products sold in Virginia. The average value of agricultural products sold per farm for most farmers were $91,625, but the African American farmer was $43,000, and even most of those are definitely not that high. I'll speak for most of us are usually half of that or a third of that. The average size of a farm in Virginia is 180 acres. The average size of a Black-owned farm is 78 acres. In 2017, the number of farms in Virginia totaled, again, 43,000, down from, I'm sorry, my clicker is in front of my slide. There we go. So the Black farmers are down 6.1%, but the Black farmers constituted 0.3% of those farmers. And our farm decline was 25% from 2012, as opposed to 6.1% from the average farmer. And the land and farms is significantly lower as well. 7.8 million acre farms are down again 6.1%. In 2012, where African American lands were down 27%. So with these percentages going down the way they will, within the next 2 generations, if nothing is done about it, the African American farmer will be extinct. This was the same statement that was made in 1982 in the USDA report, that if something wasn't done in 1982, by 2000, there would be no Black farmers. And we're almost at the same tipping point in 2001. That if something isn't done presently to really not just support Black farmers, but to bring in new Black farmers, I would say by 2050, we will be down to less than 100 Black farmers in the state. So Africulture came into existence to support this effort of having more culturally sensitive, culturally understanding, and culturally impactful programs to support and show the values of agriculture. I've worked very closely with VDACS, which is the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, on creating programs. I'm trying to work with FFA and 4-H as well, and various vocational institutions in the state to really try to support and bring in more young farmers. As I tell them and anybody else who will listen, Governor Northam, amongst other people, that marijuana and hemp are the gateway plants to agriculture. That if we allow more Black farmers to get involved in that and really share that with our young people and take the stigma away from those plants, we'll be able to bring in a whole new crop of young farmers, Black, white, and otherwise, to be a shield around the environment and around the Commonwealth in terms of having our farmer shield. As we go beyond, I try to share something about what we can do next. What can you do to make a greater impact upon your community in terms of what I've shared today? And the first thing I always say is that you first have to admit that you have a problem, just like with any other thing. In those 12-step programs, the first thing you have to admit is that you have a problem with this substance. In America, in Virginia, Piedmont, Louisiana, and Orange County, we have to admit that racism is a long-standing problem, has been, and will continue to be until we acknowledge this problem. And I really try to, especially in light of this COVID reality, that's really shed light on just how precious our time is and how precious and valued our relationships are as we've been restricted from it. COVID and all that comes with it is very much equatable to racism in America. One, we never know how it's spread, and we never can see it, and you rarely can tell who has it. So for Black people in America, we never tell who is and who is not racist. But it's just something that can be spread by a word, by an attitude, by just a look. Two, we find ourselves as Black people constantly wearing masks. And we're wearing masks in the sense that we are very, very rarely ourselves in public. You know, we can take our mask off at home, but in public, we have to put on a mask to protect us from this racism virus that we've been dealing with for far too long. We also get rejected or turned away at various stores for not having a mask on, for not fitting that demeanor. So we, you know, if we're not wearing a mask properly or not wearing a mask, we may be refused service. We may not be allowed in certain places. We may have the cops called on us because we're not wearing our mask. We may have our businesses, you know, boycotted because we're not wearing a mask, not seeing that we're wearing the right mask. Lastly, with the pandemic, it's deadly to a lot of us. It causes problems in our system in terms of our health, causing stress. It can be problematic in terms of just physical confrontations in which you end up losing your life because of it. It can affect us mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically. It affects us at school. It affects our teacher-student relationships. It affects us at work with our employer-employee relationships. It affects us in going into financial institutions and other places to try to do business. So if you see racism as just like COVID and all the restrictions that have come into place because of COVID, we can understand how racism has affected the African American in society. When you can look at it through a COVID lens, you should be able to be more empathetic about what African Americans have experienced and are experiencing to this very day. But unfortunately, unlike with COVID, there is no vaccine for racism. You know, conscious education to really help you get your immunity up against it and to fight against it. The next thing that I would encourage everyone to do is support Black farmers, support local farmers, support small farmers in the state. Small farmers make up about 43,000 farmers in the state. And we are not as supported as much as we need to be. And I work on various aspects of that to provide more support. And as I constantly say as well, farmers don't need advocates, we need customers. We constantly need customers. So if you see a farm stand anywhere, stop, support that farmer. They need your help, they need your support, they need you to buy their produce. Their produce is usually the healthiest and definitely the closest to you. And it's good to be able to support those guys and then add to your nutrition as well. The next step I always encourage is to support Black-owned businesses and financial institutions. In this area, those are few and far between, but if you see any or know of any, regardless of what they're selling, definitely support in any way you can. I say definitely patronize Black-owned, racial understanding, implicit bias, and uncomfortable conversations with companies like Africulture. Africulture does a lot of trainings with various organizations and groups throughout the country and throughout the state to provide, again, different levels of racial understanding and historical perspectives. Before we can start talking about uprooting racism or getting rid of racism, it's imperative to understand the roots of it. So we really focus on getting down to the roots first and foremost, and then from there, creating action steps based upon the individuals taking those trainings to, you know, meet the goals that we're trying to meet together and to guide you along the way. Another thing that can be done is willing wealth back to Indigenous and Black individuals or organizations. Wealth is created in two ways. One through, you know, standard business, real estate, and things like that. But a lot of times, wealth is created through legacy, through inheritances, and you end up giving wealth to individuals. And I know that can be a very touchy conversation to have on a lot of different levels. But if we talk about leveling the playing field and creating a more just society, that is definitely one of the ways to do that. As I've noted here in a very modest detail of some of the discrimination our family has experienced and the nation has experienced, this is one area in which you can definitely right some of those wrongs. And no one can say anything about it to you about it because You won't be here to really listen or be able to hear. Next, we've also created a Black Pharma Fund with Virginia Food Share Capital and Africulture. The Black Pharma Fund will be launched, or has been launched, but it'll be active in between April and June. And what this does is serves as a subsidy for Black farmers to support them in their produce and their goods and services they provide. As you probably may know, with most farmers, we get pennies for our work, and we don't really get a lot in terms of our labor. We spend a lot of time working, but we only get $1, maybe $2 for our college per bunch, or maybe even per pound, depending on who you're selling it to. So these are things that we can do that, Africulture has elected to do to try to support our Black farmers, to keep them from being an endangered species and bring them back into a full population again. Another thing you can do is invest in your own education about race and racial dynamics via reading, YouTube, various music that you can listen to, and then more importantly, having direct conversations with those in the community about race and race issues. The older generation maybe doesn't want to talk about it as much. I found, just personally, it's not something they really take, they see things more so as being equal, on the same level playing field. I am very open to having conversations about it, very historical conversations about it, challenging various historical myths or what's believed to be facts. We're in an area in which Civil War history is very important to a lot of individuals, and I definitely like to challenge various aspects of Civil War history. There's some good, there's some bad, and there's some ugly. And we have to be open and honest about all those things, and just let history speak for itself. And the last thing I always recommend is try to place yourself in others' shoes. Understanding about another person's experience can help you better understand them and be more empathetic and understanding. Many times, depending on what is said or in the context or the environment that we're talking, it may be stated that we're playing a race card. And I can rest assured that most Black people I know are not playing a race card. They're just expressing their experiences. And these experiences are compounded over generations. So that you feel like, a lot of things are racial because that's how the lens has been pretty much since your upbringing. That you've always noticed that there's a difference between one individual, one group of people than yourself. So I won't tarry too much longer as we're approaching the end of this, or getting close to the top of the hour. I want to say Badasi, which is thank you in Tree, Toda, which is thank you in Hebrew, Akpe, which is thank you in the Airway Nation, and then thank you, which is thank you in English. Definitely Carter Brothers, Carter Farms, and Africulture appreciate Louisa Historical Society as well as Orange County Historical Society for allowing me to speak today. I'm definitely open to any and all questions. You can see my contact information below. But thank you for your time, and please ask any questions. Thank you, Carlene.
Yes, I just want to say thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, for sharing your family history and also doing such a good job of tying in the regional and national historical themes and events that were happening that affected your family and so many other families. I do apologize. Overall, the audio was fairly good for rural internet, but there were a few spots where it went out. So if anybody has any questions about anything they couldn't hear properly or anything else, please ask it now in the chat box. That was a great presentation, and the chat box is going off with lots of accolades to you, Michael.
Thank you. And it's really, I apologize on behalf of my audio. I'm much better in person, and I'm much better because I can usually ask questions to the audience as we're going along. I like to be a lot more interactive. You're kind of limited to what you can and can't say in Demio and Zoom, but I appreciate it.
We'll stay on for another couple minutes just in case anybody has any questions. And I will transfer to actually our PowerPoint presentation just in case anyone would like my contact information to learn any more about any of those programs that we're doing, or any other information. We do have a question. Where's the Carter Seed Store?
You can go to carterbrothers.net. I'll put it in the chat here. In this past year for Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, we grew out the African Black Peanut. They may be sold out already, but it will be available next year as well.
Wonderful. And the other question we have is if this presentation will be available online. Yes, it will be made available on our YouTube channel. And actually, if you visit our YouTube channel, you'll see other presentations. We have 2 more presentations coming up as part of our Black History Month programming. On the 13th, we have Dr. Shelley Murphy, who is part of the UVA Descendants Project, and she will talk about some of the Louisa County individuals who were enslaved and worked at UVA that she has discovered in her research. And then on the 20th, there's actually a webinar that myself and Marilyn Campbell, our grant program manager, are putting on to talk about our African American history initiatives and how community members can be involved in those. So visit our website to sign up for those programs. And if you miss them, then you can see the recordings on YouTube. There's a question about, do you know, Michael, if there were any Tuskegee Airmen from Orange County? You might not know that.
There is one. In Orange County proper, there's a memorial to him, I think, across from that, I'm trying to think of that road. But there's a memorial for him. He said his name is Andrew Maples. And there is a landmark there across from the, I want to say the chainsaw dealer on the left-hand side and across the street where the Democratic National Office is in Orange. Right across from there. And do you know if your family were members of the Black Pharma Cooperatives of Virginia during the Depression? I do not know. I will inquire with my great uncle Joe, who's one of the last ones still living with a superb memory. I inquire with him about that as well. He was born in the late 30s, so he would have heard more than we actually known, but he remembers quite a bit. Next to Taylor Park, yep, on the bypass. Yes, I have worked with various other youth. I've worked with various 4-H programs and FFA programs in the state, usually working with their group. Work with various gardening clubs. I've done a couple presentations for schools. I want to say Riverview, as well as Thornburg High School, and a couple of other groups. Because of COVID, I haven't worked with youth as much in the last year, outside of a few distant this Zoom calls. This season we will have some more homeschool groups come out to the farm to do some volunteer work on the weekends, and we've had a couple of homeschool groups to work with as well. As you know, COVID has kind of shifted everything, and with a lot of children especially, to really engage them properly, I like to have them outside, hands-on, because as much as I think I may be a good speaker, they show me I'm not when they fall asleep on me. So I I take that always the wrong way. So I think most children need to just be outside and kind of working with the hands and seeing things. So we do offer our services to youth groups in the area. And definitely as COVID passes, we definitely open up our farm on the weekends to various volunteer groups to come out. And do we work with the Extension Service? Yes, we work with VCE quite a bit, the food safety team at VCE. I work with Virginia State Small Farm Outreach Program, which was kind of like the Black farmer side of cooperative extension. So I've worked with them presently. So we work in conjunction with VCE, the Extension Service, quite a bit on a lot of different things. I do workshops with them. I do trainings, I do farm seminars, et cetera, on a whole myriad of topics. Do I have outlets for my products in the area, farmers markets? We do have outlets for our products, probably too many. I work with 4P Foods in Warrenton. I work with Fresh Farms out of DC. They've invited me to their farmers markets. Because I'm a one-man staff person of sorts, I don't have a lot of help, so I try to, be able to sell my goods via more bigger stores or grocery stores. And we do a lot of ethnic vegetables. So I work with a African market in Charlottesville, African market in Fredericksburg, selling okra and various other African vegetables there. I am not a part of a CSA, and we really don't do a lot of active markets right now. We just mainly sell to distributors and stores. But keep up with Carlene, I'll give her a link of where our products can be found in this coming season as we kind of work out our marketing strategy for this year. We won't have any on-farm visits in terms of sales this year for sure. My grandmother is 90 and my great uncle is about 90. For COVID concerns, they've asked me to kind of keep traffic to a minimum.
Wonderful. Well, I think we're just about wrapped up. If anybody thinks of any questions, please follow up with myself or with Michael. We do have one more question. Did your family work with the extension service when it was segregated?
I do not think so. My great uncle Alfonso, he was more of a custom farmer, and there's no accounts that worked in extension or worked with extension. I think he just had relationships in the county, especially on Tatum Road and around the area. So that was, but I have no recollection. I don't want to share any history of him working with the extension service when it was segregated. My favorite recipes that I can share. Oh my goodness. Oh goodness. There's a recipe that you can look up called Red Red. Red Red is using the black eyed pea or the cow pea from West Africa, cooked in a palm oil, tomatoes, stew-like base, and made with a white fried plantain. That's one of my favorite dishes out of West Africa, as well as one called inkatumari, which is a taro leaf. We grow the taro leaf at our farm. Taro leaf, cocoa yam leaf. It's what we call the elephant ear. The big heart-shaped like ear that people generally plant for decoration. With the tuber one, the one I know anyway, is more so conducive for eating. I wouldn't recommend eating the ones that you may get from Walmart or Lowe's at all. It does have a high level of oxalic acid, so you have to cook it a long time to make sure the oxalic acid is out. But that's another great green that I love. But Red Red, if you YouTube or Google Red Red recipe, by far you won't be disappointed.
Wonderful. Well, we're a few minutes over, so we're gonna wrap up. Thank you so much for your presentation, Michael, and thank you so much to our audience for attending. Please share our YouTube channel so that your friends and family members can watch the recording. Stay safe and well, everyone.
Thank you.